What's good, partners? What's good, my lovers? What's good, family? If you're here, it's because you're a bike dork, you know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you and I love you. Comments are always welcome. Spicy opinions welcome. You know how we do it over here. Any case, I wanted to talk a little bit about tire pressure. How do you find the right tire pressure for you? Now, I'm really talking about tubeless tires because I made a video about tubeless tires. You know, if you like tubes, that's cool. There's not much to say about tubes. You put the tubes in, you're all good. One thing I like mostly about tubeless tires, one of the benefits for me, what I talked about in my other video, is how you experience the rolling resistance in tubeless tires. To me, it seems like when I rode with tubes, there was a dramatic feeling difference in having low pressure and having the right pressure, air quotes. When you had the right pressure, your ride feel was great. It wasn't great in terms of the feel, but speed, you could get a lot of speed, you could maintain speed, and you weren't as tired. When your tire pressure got low on tubes, you would feel sluggish and slow. On tube tires, I don't get as dramatic a feeling with that. When my tire pressure is really low or really high, I don't get that draggy feeling. So I would say one of the most dramatic ways you will experience how the rolling resistance is improved on tubeless tires in an unscientific way is that low pressures don't seem as draggy and slow. You don't get that dramatic feeling. Let's say that your tire pressure can go as high as 70, but you run it as low as 25. You're not gonna feel such a dramatic, I'm struggling to pedal. It'll just have a different feel, if that makes any sense. So a lot of the time when you're finding the right tire pressure with tubeless, I would argue it's all about the way it feels to you, because there isn't this golden PSI that's gonna make you necessarily faster per se. You can experiment with that. But what I kind of like to look at it is with the maximum and minimum PSI, because if you just started with tubeless, it's gonna be weird to you. Your mind is gonna be like, my mind can't run a 30 PSI tire. I just can't do it. It's difficult for people who, for me, I went from in the hundreds with the skinny tires at 23 millimeters down to the 32 millimeters, and I had to run those at 85, and I was so skeptical. I was like, really? I was trying to pump it as high as the other things, but it's like, no, you got to stick to 85. So I really struggled with for the first few months with that, of being like disciplined, being like, you can't over pump it like the other tires. And so that similar, I got used to that, and I was like, over time I was like, okay, lower PSI is not necessarily a bad thing, because I grew up, or like my bike career, high PSI was the golden thing and low PSI was terrible. And so you kind of have to switch your mind over and be like, okay, 30 PSI is like a legit thing that professional gravel riders ride, 25 as low as 25. And so what I would say, because your mind, you have to kind of get it into your mind, you just start at the highest one or near the highest. If it says the highest rating is 70, it's usually never more than 70 on tubeless tires, the 40 millimeters. So just start there and then slowly come down for like increments of 5. You could even try increments of 10 and see if your rides are dramatically slower, and then just see how the rides feel. For me now, because I've dialed it in a certain way, if I'm riding the Poseidon and I have my son on it with me, then I'll put in a little bit of a higher PSI. If it's me on my own, I've been riding in the 30s now on mixed surfaces, and I will ride 30s because, mid 30s, because I'm still riding on road. If I was doing mostly gravel, I would start to experiment within the high 20s, 25, between 25 and 30. So it just kind of depends. When I go on my rides with Uncle Dan, if you've seen one of my videos riding with Uncle Dan, he likes road more, so I would put it maybe at 40, 45 if I was riding on road, but maybe 40, because again, once you kind of get used to tubeless tires, you'll really become like a lover of the ride feel. You'll really start to notice, this feels really cushy, and you'll start favoring PSIs that feel like make the ride feel comfortable. And I think over time, I've really just brought it down and down and down to where I'm comfortable. If my PSI is like 29, 25, I'm like, that's cool. You'll get to a point with that front wheel, if your PSI is too low, you're not going to be able to corner that well. So you kind of have to, that's one dramatic effect if it gets way too low where it's like flat. That's kind of all my crashes have been because the PSI, the tires are flat in the front and you don't realize it till you need to corner and then you're like, I'm falling. So that's one actual downside of tubeless is that they fool you sometimes, but before you ride, if you don't check them, they can be really flat, but still like present like they could ride. And you take one turn and you're on your butt. And that's happened a few times where I'm like, the front tire is flat when it just totally buckles and gives. So you have to watch out for that so that the steering doesn't get too squishy. So that's like you've gone way too far. But anything above that, I've noticed like between 50 PSI and 30 PSI, I'm not losing tons of speed. I'm really just gaining comfort. So keep that in mind. Really over time, you kind of have to fool your mind to get lower and lower and lower, especially if you've been used to the old school way and the old school theories. But if you're already used to it, you kind of know that just do it by feel. Kind of go lower each time, do it by feel, and really try to be consistent with the pressures that you keep it at, just so you can kind of document mentally like how the ride feels. And know that like with tubeless tires, another beautiful thing is that you can ride different PSIs based on the surfaces that you're riding. If you're riding off pavement, make it a little bit higher. If you're riding with some load, make it a little bit higher. If you're riding off-road, you can make it a little bit lower, and you kind of taper it like that. Thanks for listening, my lovers. You dorks are always, always appreciated, and I'll see you in the next